Welcome to the Deep Dive. Tonight we're looking into a story that, starts familiarly enough. Celebration, spring break kicking off, a night out. But for Brian Schaffer, a 27-year-old med student in Columbus, Ohio, April 1st, 2006, didn't end like just any other night. It was the start of this really baffling mystery. He basically vanished, partly caught on camera, but leaving everyone police completely stumped for almost 2 decades now. So our goal today is to really unpack Brian's disappearance. We'll go through the details of that night, the investigation, the different theories, and the questions that still hang over this case. We want to make sure you have a solid grasp of the facts and the key points about one of Ohio's most puzzling missing person cases. So let's get started. First, let's talk about Brian Schaffer himself. Who was he before he disappeared? Born February 11, 1979, Pickerington, Ohio. Seemed like a really driven guy. Graduated high school in 97, got a microbiology degree from OSU, and then in 2004 started medical school there. By March 2006, he was well into his second year. On a clear path, you'd think.
Yeah, and it's important to understand the context of his life right then. It wasn't just about med school. Just weeks before, in March 2006, his mother, Renee, had passed away from myelodysplasia, a huge loss. Friends mentioned that, while he seemed okay on the surface, it hit him really hard that at a complex emotional layer. But his life wasn't all shadowed. He was serious about his girlfriend, Alexis Wagoner, another med student. They were planning to get engaged, actually, and had this big spring break trip planned to Miami.
Right, those personal details, they make it so much more real, don't they? His dreams of maybe starting a band like Jimmy Buffett, even while in med school. But does all that background, the loss, the plans, does it sometimes muddy the waters for investigators? Like, too many what-ifs?
That's a really good point. It absolutely provides crucial context. But yeah, it can definitely lead investigators down speculative paths. The trick is always grounding those personal aspects in actual evidence, not letting them become distractions. But for the family, of course, those details are vital. And Brian has some distinct features, too, things that became really important later. A Pearl Jam Alive tattoo, the stick figure one on his upper right arm, and a unique fleck in one eye. Those were key identifiers in the search.
Okay, so we have a picture of Brian. Now let's focus on the night itself. March 31st, 2006. Start of spring break. Should have been a time to relax. Earlier that evening, he actually had dinner, steak dinner, with his dad, Randy. Randy noticed Brian seemed really wiped out, probably from studying for exams.
Yeah, exhausted. But he still went out. Around 9 p.m., he met up with his friend, William Florence. People called him Clint at the Ugly Tuna Saloona. That's a bar in the South Campus Gateway complex, right there on High Street. Busy place, lots of students. About an hour later, Brian called Alexis from the bar. She'd already headed to Toledo to see family before their Miami trip.
And from there, it sounds like a pretty standard night out for students, right? They hit a few bars.
Yeah, they went bar hopping. Headed down towards the Arena District. Clint Florence later said they had like one shot of hard liquor at each bar they stopped at. You can picture it, spring break starting, music, energy, just celebrating the end of exams.
Okay, so they're out, having drinks. Then what happened?
Well, after midnight, they actually circled back, headed back to the Ugly Tuna Saloona. This time, Clint's friend, Meredith Reed, was with them. They went back for, a last round. And this is where things get critical. Inside the bar, Brian got separated from Clint and Meredith. We don't know exactly why or for how long, but then just before 2 a.m., security cameras caught him outside the main entrance. He was seen talking briefly to 2 young women, and then he just walks off camera, away from the entrance area.
And that's the last time anyone definitively saw him. He just walks off screen. Clint and Meredith couldn't find him inside.
Apparently not. They looked for him, called his phone multiple times. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., they waited outside with everyone else leaving. But Brian never came out.
It's amazing how quickly that thought, he could probably just went home, turns into something else entirely. Is that typical in these cases, that initial dismissal?
Very typical. It's almost a coping mechanism, isn't it, to assume the simplest explanation. But the planned trip, that flight to Miami on Monday morning with Alexis, when he missed that, everything changed. That's the point where concern becomes real alarm. The gone home idea just didn't hold up anymore. And that's when he was officially reported missing to Columbus police.
So the police investigation starts, and naturally they zero in on the Ugly Tuna Saloona, last known location. And you mentioned it's in the South Campus Gateway, which was relatively new, but in an area known for higher crime rates, hence all the security cameras. You'd think that would help.
You would think, and this is where the frustration really sets in. The cameras did capture some things. They saw Brian, Clint, and Meredith going up the escalator to the bar around 1:15 a.m., and they caught that last glimpse of Brian outside around 1:55 a.m., talking to those women, then moving away. But the crucial part, the absolute puzzle, is the main exit camera never showed him leaving when the bar closed. He went in, was seen briefly outside, but never seen walking out that main way.
That's the hook, isn't it? How does that happen? In a place supposedly covered by cameras. What were the initial thoughts on why he wasn't seen leaving? Maybe he disguised himself somehow.
That was floated, yeah, maybe changed clothes, pulled a hat low. But it feels like a bit of a reach, right? The more plausible and perhaps more chilling possibility relates to the building's layout itself. There was another way out, a service store, not far from where he was last seen talking to those women.
A service door. Okay, where did that lead?
It led down a hallway, and at that time, that hallway connected to an area that was under construction. And from that construction area, there was another exit to the outside. Police were a bit skeptical, thinking it would be hard to navigate, especially if intoxicated. And importantly, the cameras covering that specific service store area weren't perfect. One was panning, constantly moving. The other was manually operated. So it's entirely possible he could have slipped out that way during a camera blind spot. Footage from other nearby bars showed nothing either.
So it highlights the limits of surveillance, even when it seems comprehensive. A blind spot, a service exit.
Exactly. It shows how someone could potentially leave unseen even from a monitored building. It's a stark reminder that cameras don't always capture everything.
Okay, so beyond the bar itself, what did the initial search involve?
It was pretty extensive. Police officers, K-9 units, they covered the streets around the gateway. They checked dumpsters, talked to people living nearby. They even got permission to search parts of the city's sewer system. And flyers went up everywhere. His picture, that Pearl Jam tattoo, the fleck in his eye trying desperately to get someone, anyone to recognize him.
But nothing came of it. No solid leads from that initial sweep.
Frustratingly, no. Nothing useful turned up. And adding to the mystery, his car was found parked right where he left it, near his apartment on King Avenue, only about 6 blocks away. Nothing seemed disturbed inside his apartment either. It just deepens that central question: how does someone just vanish without a trace in this day and age?
With no immediate answers, did the police start looking at other possibilities? Like maybe he left intentionally, especially with his mom passing away so recently.
That was definitely considered. Voluntary disappearance. Maybe he just needed time away to grieve, you know? It's a natural thought after such a loss. But as time went on, and there was zero contact, no indication he'd planned to leave, that theory seemed less and less likely. He had plans, a girlfriend, med school.
And what about the people he was with? Clint Florence and Meredith Reed. Polygraphs.
Right, the investigation moved to those closest to him that night. His dad, Randy, took a polygraph and passed. Meredith Reed also took one and passed, but Clint Florence, his friend, who he met up with first, he refused to take one. And that refusal, well, it definitely raised eyebrows and has remained a point of contention ever since.
Yeah, that always stands out. Legally, though, refusing a polygraph, lawyers often advise against it, don't they? They're not admissible in court, can be unreliable.
Exactly. From a purely legal perspective, refusal is often standard advice. It doesn't matter if you're innocent or not. It can just create complications.
But for the family, for the public looking in, it looks suspicious. It leaves that question hanging, which must be agonizing.
Absolutely, and it fuels speculation. Interestingly, the 2 women Brian was last seen talking to, they were identified later, but apparently they said in 2009 they were never actually asked to take a polygraph. So different approaches there. But then there's this really haunting detail involving Alexis, his girlfriend. She kept calling his phone, hoping. Mostly, it went straight to voicemail. Until one night in September, months after he vanished, she called and it rang. 3 times. Can you even imagine hearing that after months of silence?
Oh, wow. That must have been just an incredible shock. A surge of hope, maybe. What was the explanation for that?
The phone company, Singular at the time, called it a computer glitch, just a technical error. However, and this is a really strange detail, around that same time, his phone reportedly pinged a cell tower way out in Hilliard. That's like 14 miles northwest of Columbus. So even if the ringing was a glitch, the ping suggests the phone might have been powered on or at least somehow active miles away from where he disappeared. It's another one of those small, baffling clues that keeps hope and mystery alive.
A glitch that coincides with a ping miles away.
Yeah, that's strange. And these little things, they kept the search going, didn't they? Wider efforts.
They did. The case got national attention. Yeah. Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam even mentioned Brian at a concert in Cincinnati later that year, asking the crowd for info because of Brian's tattoo and love for the band.
Yeah.
Tips came in. Sightings were reported from places like Michigan, Texas, even as far away as Sweden. Police looked into them, but nothing panned out.
And his dad, Randy, he kept searching relentlessly, didn't he? Even after losing his wife just before Brian vanished. He did. It's almost impossible to fathom his grief. He was desperate. He consulted a psychic at one point who suggested Brian's body was in water near a bridge. So Randy, along with Brian's brother Derek and others, they actually bought waders and spent countless hours searching the Olentangy River near bridges in the area, just hoping for any sign. That possibility even briefly made police consider the controversial smiley face killer theory, but they ultimately found no link. Then the story takes another incredibly tragic turn. In September 2008, Randy Schaffer himself died. There was a bad windstorm, and he was outside his home in Baltimore, Ohio, cleaning up debris. A large branch broke off a tree and struck him. He was found the next day. It's just devastating.
That's just unbelievably tragic. Losing his wife, then his son disappears, and then he dies in this awful accident while still searching. And then, didn't something awful happen with his online obituary? A hoax.
Yeah, just unbelievably cruel. An online condolence book was set up for Randy. Someone left an entry signed to Dad Love Brian, U.S. Virgin Islands. It implied Brian was alive and had just run off. Police traced it to a public computer in Franklin County, confirmed it was just a disgusting hoax, pouring salt in the wound for the family.
It's just awful. And this brings us back to Clint Florence, the friend who refused the polygraph. After Randy died, his lawyer made some statements, didn't he?
He did. Neil Rosenberg, Florence's attorney, communicated with a private investigator. He suggested that the police had led him to believe Brian was actually alive. Rosenberg basically said, if Brian's alive, then he's the one causing pain, not my client. He insisted Florence had told police everything he knew early on. But Brian's brother, Derek, and his girlfriend, Alexis, they still strongly feel Clint knows more. Derek has even suggested maybe Clint knows if Brian chose to leave. It just shows that deep divide, that lingering suspicion fueled by the refusal to take the polygraph.
It really does underscore the impact of non-cooperation, perceived or real. It leaves so many questions unanswered for the people left behind. So where does the official investigation stand now, or at least in recent years?
Well, as late as 2014, Columbus police said they were still getting tips, maybe a couple a month through Crime Stoppers, but nothing concrete. They had like 4 boxes of files on the case. One of the original detectives, Andre Edwards, he reviewed the camera footage again and stated he was 100% certain Brian didn't leave via that main escalator exit. Police have mentioned having 3 main theories about what might have happened, but they've never made those public.
And there was that potential sighting in Mexico more recently.
Right. In 2019, maybe early 2020, this photo started going around online. It showed a homeless man in Tijuana, Mexico, who did bear a resemblance to Brian. The local news sent it to the detective, who passed it to the FBI for facial analysis. But unfortunately, the FBI analysis concluded it wasn't him. And then in 2021, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation released an age-progressed photo showing what Brian might look like at 42. A very stark reminder of how much time has passed.
Such a long time with no answers. But amidst all that pain, Randy Schaffer, Brian's dad, actually created something positive, didn't he? A lasting legacy.
He really did. It's quite remarkable. In the time between Brian's disappearance and his own death, Randy didn't just search, he advocated. He connected with other Ohio families who had missing adult loved ones and had faced similar frustrations with the system, inconsistencies in how cases were handled.
What kind of inconsistencies?
Well, before this, there wasn't really a statewide standard. How urgently a case was investigated, how data was entered, how agencies shared information. It could vary a lot depending on the specific police department. Families felt like their cases weren't always getting the priority or the uniform approach they needed. So Randy and these other families, they pushed the state legislature for change.
And they succeeded. What did they achieve?
Yes, they were instrumental in getting a bill passed that established Ohio's first statewide protocol specifically for missing adult cases. It mandated things like faster reporting, consistent use of state and national databases, better cooperation between different police forces, basically ensuring a more systematic and hopefully effective response across the board. And that law was enacted before Randy died. It's an incredible legacy, really, turning his personal tragedy into something that could potentially help countless other families facing that same nightmare. It shows how advocacy can bring about real systemic improvements.
That's a powerful legacy indeed, born from such terrible circumstances. Which brings us back to the central, haunting question of Brian Schaffer. How does a bright young medical student just disappear from a bar, seen on camera going in, seen briefly outside, but never recorded leaving? It remains one of the most baffling cases out there.
It truly does. And it leaves us, and you listening, with a lot to think about. When you consider all the possibilities, foul play, an accident, even that slim chance of him choosing to vanish, what part of Brian's story resonates most strongly with you? And maybe more broadly, why do you think these kinds of cases, these sudden, unexplained disappearances, grip us so tightly? Why do they continue to haunt us even years later when the trail seems completely cold?